What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to yet another What If Deku was Spider-Man. I know. I've done this series twice before, but you're still gonna watch it. Come on now. It's gonna be a little bit different, and I'm doing it admittedly because I have Spider-Man Deku art. Okay, I'm gonna be honest, you caught me in 4K. But quick question, did you guys enjoy the intro? Come on, it was funny. Like it was like a flute version of the Spider-Man song. I don't know. I just thought it was funny and I had it included in the video. That said, guys, before you guys get into the video, make sure you guys go down below and comment down below who you guys think the ship for the video is going to be, as well as if you haven't subscribed to the video yet, to the channel yet, what are you doing? Like 60% of you guys are not subscribed, and I am just questioning why. So if you ever want to do it today because it's my birthday. Please. Anyways, though, yeah, enjoy.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
We start a story in the perspective of a 4-year-old Izuku. This would be the day of his birthday, and there was nothing more that Izuku was more excited about than for him to go to the Quirk doctor. So we start off something like this. Mom, can we please go to the Quirk doctor? Mom, please! Trying to wake Inko up from her bed. Inko would look at him and be like, Izuku, the Quirk appointment is at like 10. What are you doing? And he would be like, Mom, look, please. Can we go now? And Inko just turns and she sees Izuku just straight, like, hanging by the wall like a spider would. You know, he's obviously wall crawling. But the second she sees this, she's like, oh my god, he got a Quirk. She would immediately grab her car keys and proceed to drive off to the direction of the Quirk doctor. Now, it's at this point that they would arrive, and Izuku and Inko would get off, and this time the Quirk doctor would not be Dr. Ujiko, it would be a different doctor, who would just go on to inform them that Deku is a quirk called Spider, and he has all the abilities of a spider, meaning that his strength is enhanced because spiders can lift like 10 times their own body weight. He has like the ability to stick on walls, shoot webs, and a little bit of a spider sense. Inko hearing this would be like, wow, Izuku, that's amazing. And the Quirk doctor would inform her that, yeah, it is amazing, and not only that, but her son has the potential to become a top 10 hero at least. Looking to Inko, telling her that she better do a great job raising this boy because he has the potential to become a great hero someday. Telling her that he and her got very lucky with a quirk like that. And then, you know, he just sends them off with Izuku having a lollipop and just shooting webs all over the place, not knowing what to do with himself. He's like a 14-year-old boy at this moment. Nah, but seriously though, they end up arriving back home. I'm just going to be saying, I'm going to be throwing in a little 10-year time skip. And for this what if, I'm just going to be saying that Deku doesn't know who Bakugo, because I don't know, why not? I don't feel like adding Bakugo into the story until later on, and then establishing Deku and Bakugo's dynamic in UA. So I'm just going to be saying that the reason that they don't go to the same school is because Deku just doesn't live in that same school district, and Inko and Mitsuki aren't friends. So yeah, they don't actually know each other, and so when Deku actually goes to school, he doesn't actually like Izuku being the person that he is. I don't think he's gonna go around like showing off his quirk, being like, I'm so much better than you guys or anything. I think Izuku's just gonna be like, you know, chill about it. He's obviously gonna be excited, but eventually he's not gonna be like a show off after he kind of gets over it. So I think that he'll be fine, and that all that really happens is Izuku just, you know, he has a pretty good 10 years. So eventually the UA entrance exam comes in, and seeing as whatever happens during that time skip doesn't really matter, seeing as Izuku during that time would have simply just worked on his quirk, worked on his, you know, brain, because Deku's going to be extremely intelligent in this version, seeing as, you know, Peter Parker is, so why not make Deku intelligent? I mean, the man was able to create web fluid in like his science class, so I think this version of Deku should definitely be able to do a little sum when it comes to his genius level. That said, the entrance exams are right around the corner, and Deku would be getting off of the car saying, Mom, I just gotta say, thank you so much for supporting me all these years. I know Dad was never around and you always had to work 2 to 3 jobs at a time, but I just want you to know, Mom, that now, with me becoming a hero, you'll never have to work again, As soon as I become a hero, I'll get you that house you've always wanted, and you'll never have to work a day in your life ever again. I promise, Mom. And don't worry about the UA bills. I'll have that covered too as soon as I become a hero. Inkle smiles and tells her boy to go kill it. And this version of Inkle is a little chubby, but since Izuku has his quirk, she's not as fat as in canon. So, you know, she's just a little bit on the, she got a little belly type side, but not too much. Nothing crazy similar to the one that we have in canon. So after this, Izuku goes running inside, and when he's on his way inside, his spider sense tingles. And he turns to his left, only to see Uraraka about to fall. Deku catches her with his hands, and by the hands, I mean just the tips of his fingers. And Uraraka's like, what? As she looks up and sees Izuku touching her with nothing but the 5 tips of his fingers. She's like, whoa, what kind of quirk is that? And Izuku says sorry for just using it on her, but he could tell that she was about to be hurt or fall, saying that probably was going to be bad luck. Before then looking at Uraraka and saying, oh, but I'll catch you later, as he runs off into the exam site. And Uraraka just left sitting there like, I had so many questions. But she shrugs and just decides to think to herself that was a cool boy, and she would end up going inside. Now, inside, Ida would still make a fool of himself, but Deku wouldn't impact anything either otherwise, so we cut to the robot portion. What do I think would happen here? I think obviously Deku would notice Uraraka at the front, but he wouldn't say anything, just because this version of Deku's not going to go up to her, seeing as he doesn't really know her. So he stays in the back, and he just simply stays there with his little headphones on, and they're the wired kind, because my man can afford the better kind. And, you know, my man is just a peasant, a broke peasant. That's how people thought people were like in 2018. Do you guys remember that? Like 2018, if you didn't have AirPods, you were pretty much broke. People would go around being like, I don't know, man, I smell broken here. Like whenever you wouldn't be wearing AirPods. I don't know. I think it's just the funniest thing in the world looking back at it in hindsight. But cutting back to the story, Deku would simply just be stretching until eventually President Mike would say, what are you guys doing? You guys out of your mind waiting for somebody to tell you to go? You think heroes get told to go? Go, go, go! The gates begin to swing open, and Deku would shoot his webs at the top of the gates, as he would then propel himself into the area before anybody else could get inside, and he jumps and leaps on top of his first robot. His spider sense goes off, and he is able to dodge the attacks that the robot is able to throw at him, and then punch the 0-pointer, destroying it upon contact, seeing as Deku doesn't have to hold back. I mean, it's a robot after all. So he goes inside and begins to use his Spider-Man-like abilities to just absolutely obliterate everything. He uses his webs to make a bunch of robots collide with each other to destroy themselves, and he uses his physical strength to actually use one of the robot arms to actually attack the robots themselves, using a bunch of different tactics that he would end up thinking up to pretty much create a huge amount of robots to come towards him. And Deku would use, all in all, his wall crawling, his web swinging to get as far and to cover as much ground as possible and destroy as many robots as he possibly can. I'm pretty sure many of you guys could imagine what Spider-Man would do if he was to fight against a bunch of robots, and that's exactly what Deku does. He would end up racking out a huge amount of points. I can't really be bothered to tell you guys how many, but just know Spider-Man and My Heroverse, a couple of robots, pick your poison. Deku does pretty well on all, and so he kind of just ends up making it until eventually the 0-pointer begins to rumble the ground. Now, when Deku feels these vibrations, his spider sense would begin going off like crazy, informing him that there is definitely imminent danger nearby. And so from here, Deku just basically goes on to watch as everybody, and I mean everybody, begins to try to run away from the 0-pointer. Deku would do his best to act as if he's not scared, but it's at this point that Deku would actually begin running away with everyone until he notices Uraraka caught under some rubble. Deku would immediately shoot his web at the top of some buildings that begin swinging towards her, as he then shoots some web at her right before the 0-pointer is able to actually crush her, and he saves Uraraka, gaining himself an extra 50 to 60 rescue points, I believe it was, and then from there solidifying his spot in UA High. So after this, he takes a recovery girl, goes home, eats some dinner, and 2 weeks go by of him waiting for the results. So Deku waits for his results, and it's honestly pretty much everything you guys would expect. All Might ends up informing Deku that he passed, and how could they turn down somebody as heroic as him, and the first day of UA rolls around the corner. Deku ends up making it to the doorway, and when he does, he ends up opening the door to see a blonde-haired boy and a blue-haired boy just sitting there. He recognizes the one with the blue hair, but the blonde-haired kid, he's just like, who is that and why are they arguing? He just notices Bakugo look at his direction, and Deku gives him a smile before walking to the back of the classroom and sitting down. Shortly after, Araraka walks inside and says, "Oh, hey, you're the kid from the other day, right? You saved me from a fall." Izuku gives her a pretty nice smile and says, "Hey, what's her name?" She introduces herself as Ochako Uraraka, and from here, Aizawa actually budges in out of nowhere, waking up, telling them all to meet him outside. We cut to them all being outside and him then tossing the ball to Izuku, informing him that since he got the highest score on the entrance exams, he's actually going to be the one to throw the ball. Deku smiles and then says, "Oh, sure thing," as he then proceeds to use his web and super strength to pretty much begin to spin the ball. And he pretty much shoots his web at the ball and then spins the ball as hard and fast as he can, and then pretty much just lets it go like a javelin. And it goes pretty far. How far? I'm not sure, but it goes pretty far. Just know that. And when Aizawa shows everybody the score, Kaminari and Ashido would say that it looks like fun. But after hearing that, Aizawa immediately turns to them and says, "Fun? Fun, you say? I have 3 years to mold you into perfect heroes, and you think that this is fun? Looks like I'm going to be having to turn up the stakes." And so he informs everybody that whoever gets last place is going to be expelled. From here, everybody immediately gets their game faces on and is like, "Expelled? What? What do you mean?" Actually, guys, by the way, let me turn up the gain on my microphone real quick. I'll BRB. Now that I did that, you'll probably notice a little change in the audio. It might be a little louder. I figured I would do it just because the levels weren't matching to what my normal videos are, but I digress. So Deku from here on would go to the Quirk apprehension test and would get results that I'm pretty sure Spider-Man would get. Let's say that the 50-meter dash, he gets like, I genuinely have no idea how fast or strong Spider-Man truly is, but if you are a true Marvel fan, you're probably going to be able to tell me how fast or strong he is. All I know is for the grip string test, he'll definitely be able to break it. For the long jump, he'll clear it. For the side-to-side lunges, I think he could clear that too pretty easily. And when it comes to the push-ups and sit-ups portion, he aces that relatively easily, seeing as he's been doing those his whole life, trying to train to become more powerful. So that said, what ends up going down is essentially the Quirk apprehension test is over, and this time around Deku actually ends up being by the top of the leaderboard, actually getting second place, coming second to Momo Yaoyorozu. When all is said and done, Momo looks to Izuku, who at this point is just exuding a cool personality and a little bit of cockiness, seeing as, you know, Spider-Man is a little cocky when you think about it. So yeah, you know, Deku's just exuding a cool persona. And Bakugo would be pretty angry at the fact that Izuku got better in the entrance exams than he did, thinking that he was going to be the top dog. But I guess it just means it's something to work towards. And seeing as he doesn't know Izuku on a personal level, he doesn't actually try to go attack him or anything. Just simply thinking to himself that that's going to be one milestone he's going to have to crush. Especially that little red and white haired boy, that kid with the ice quirk. He got to get rid of him too. So he pretty much ends up just thinking that and decides that, you know, he's just going to put a target on Izuku and Todoroki's back. Eventually, we cut to the day where All Might walks into the classroom late and says, "Hello everybody, I'm walking into the door like a normal person," proceeding to then inform everybody that they need to put their costumes on and meet him outside. The class would freak out, asking if someone's going to get expelled this time or something like that, but All Might would say that he's not like that, saying that Mineta getting expelled was just a little casualty along the road, with everybody saying, "Yeah, but we just hope we won't get expelled ourselves." Izuku would be thinking to himself that, yeah, that other teacher's definitely a little scary, but what can he do, you know what I mean? So eventually the time comes, and what ends up happening is everybody's outside, everyone's having a good time, and All Might informs the class that they're going to be taking the Heroes versus Villains mock test, where they're all just going to be picking teammates and then fighting against each other as heroes or villains. The rules are explained and all the teams are picked out. Now for this time I took the liberty of using a spinner to decide what the drawings are going to be, and Izuku Midoriya's teammate is actually going to be Jiro, and he is going to be fighting against Sato as well as Mina. So, you know, let's get on with it. The way that I see this going is Deku pretty much telling Mina his powers and asking her what hers are. After she tells him that, wait, who did I say was his teammate again? I said Sato and Mina, and I said Jiro was his teammate. Yeah, Jiro would explain to Izuku that her powers are pretty much like her sound attacks and stuff like that, and she can hear things pretty well. So Deku would tell her that she's going to be in charge of finding where they're at, and once she does, he'll use his abilities to crawl up the wall and catch them off guard. Jiro would nod, and so the plan would commence. I see Sato and Mina pretty much staying in the bomb room, trying to kind of just wait for them to arrive. However, I think that the way that this would all go down is essentially she begins to use her earphone jack to find what room they're at, what level they're at. And as soon as she finds out, she would say, they're on the 3rd floor. Izuku nods before then, putting on his mask, which is literally the same one that you guys see on the thumbnail, and climbing up the wall, with Jiro thinking that that's a pretty badass costume. However, Deku would end up pretty much sliding up the window and then aiming one of his web slinger hands towards Sato's direction, pretty much blinding him, using his webs to shoot it at Sato's face and mouth, so he's not even able to eat sugar. And keep in mind, this man is the diabetic king, so without his sugar, he won't be able to do a thing. So that just leaves us with Mina, who tries to shoot her acid at Deku, but he jumps in through the window using his spider sense to dodge it and rushes in at Mina's direction as she uses her acrobatic skills to give Deku a bit of a hard time. But after a little bit of a back and forth with her, that would have actually given Sato enough time to rip off the web and then rush in and eat a full gram of sugar, or no, like a huge spoonful of it to give him some Popeye strength, you know what I mean? He rushes in, tries to punch Deku, but Deku's able to dodge each and every attack, and Mina would end up shooting acid, which Deku would get Sato to get in the way and tank the full attack for him. Following this, Deku jumps off of Sato's shoulders and actually touches the bomb, causing All Might to be like, hero team wins, with Mina and Sato being like, dude, come on. But Deku would say that they did a pretty good job for amateurs, as he walks off with a smile on his face, and then he goes over towards Jiro, telling her that that was a pretty good job, they made a good team. Jiro would say that she didn't really do anything, but Izuku says that, she was there, she was his teammate, and Jiro just thinks, whatever, it's an easy A after all. Deku from here would go over towards the room where everybody would begin talking about who the MVP was, with Momo saying that it was definitely Izuku for the plan and the execution, with Izuku looking at Momo and thinking, she looked kind of good. But from here, he pretty much ends up going home, as well as does the rest of the class, and eventually, about 4 days later, Aizawa ends up informing the classroom about the USJ, gives them permission slips, and the whole class gets them signed. What I see happening after this is them simply arriving to the USJ after a mini time skip, and then all of them meeting 13, who goes on to give her boring speech, with Kurogiri arriving in the center of the USJ arena. When this happens, Kurogiri proceeds to say, sorry for inviting ourselves, heroes, but we had to crash the party somehow. As from here, multiple villains arrive, and Kurogiri pretty much ends up teleporting everybody to the locations just like usual. Deku would fall onto the area with himself using his spider sense to sense water down, or just to know that something was about to happen, so he ends up actually using his webs to swing onto the boat, and he ends up sitting there with Tsuyu, seeing as Mineta is not actually there this time. See, normally Izuku would jump into the air, punch it, and act like Bakugo to pretty much cause a little typhoon effect and take out the villains, but Deku doesn't have access to anything like that, so instead, what ends up happening this time is Deku would still end up making all the villains come towards him, and once a bunch of them start to get onto the ship, Deku would tell Tsuyu that she better be ready for a fight. And so, they actually end up having to fight some of the villains that jumped on board, and Deku would use his web to blind a couple of them, punch them away. Whenever Tsuyu was having troubles, he would jump into action and help save her. And all in all, they were trying their best to hold off these villains the most that they could. And I'd say they're pretty successful at it all in all. Eventually, they end up driving the boat towards the direction of dry land, or as close as they could get, and Tsuyu jumps off, leaving Deku the chance to jump off with her, and then from here, both of them are able to actually fight these other villains that remain on dry land, with them thinking up of how they're going to be able to pull this off. Eventually, Deku would decide that, yeah, this is going to be a little hard, but nothing that he won't be able to pull off. So he ends up fighting these water quirk users alongside Tsuyu, who would not exactly do the best and honestly would begin holding him back. He ends up saving her from one of the villains and tells her to go off, saying that she's only going to get in the way for now and that maybe some other day they'll get the chance to fight alongside each other, with Tsuyu nodding and Deku going on to obliterate the rest of the villains that were left, with high tier difficulty, I think. Seeing as there was a lot, I think he would struggle at least a little bit. And since they actually have superpowers, it definitely kind of hypes up the stakes a little bit. So he has a little bit of a hard time dealing with these villains, but eventually he does. And as soon as he finishes, he actually notices Aizawa getting his head crushed in by a Nomu. Now, as this is happening, he proceeds to be like, okay, so this is not normal. But simultaneously, as this is happening, Shigaraki rushes over towards Deku direction and tries to hit him with his fingers. But what actually happens is Aizawa was able to use his quirk cancellation ability to catch Shigaraki off guard, and Deku, using his spider senses, is able to dodge out of the way and actually punch Kurogiri straight in the face, knocking the hand from his face. As Kurogiri would be watching this, he would teleport alongside Shigaraki, and Shigaraki would say, "Nomu, kill the brat." As the Nomu would get away from Aizawa and turn his attentions towards Deku's direction before letting out a roar and going in to punch Deku. Deku would dodge out of the way and use its arm momentum against it as he causes the Nomu to punch at the ground. And Deku would say, "Hold on there, big fellow, you're not about to hit me." He begins to dodge all over the place as the Nomu begins trying to attack him, and Deku simply just outspeeds the Nomu when it comes to dodging it. By the way, guys, if you guys can hear dishes being washed in the background or dogs barking, I genuinely apologize for it, but there's not a thing I could do about it. So, yeah, like I said, the Nomu begins to attack Deku, and Deku pretty much just outplays it every step of the way. The Nomu is getting outclassed in terms of speed, not strength, by the way. Kind of similar to when Spider-Man fought the Hulk and he was able to simply dodge its attacks, is what's pretty much going on. And in case you guys never knew that Spider-Man fought the Hulk, just go read the comic. I think there was a comic on it or like an animation on it. I'm not sure, but either way, we know Spider-Man is capable of performing feats like fighting against someone like the Hulk. So I think that fighting against somebody like the Nomu should not be too far-fetched. Deku was able to hold his own against the Nomu for a while until Shigaraki gets enraged and tries to jump in, saying, "I have to do everything myself." He says, "Kurogiri," and he opens a portal to actually hit Deku without him being able to do a thing about it, but his spider senses can ride in at the perfect timing, and Deku is able to dodge it, so Shigaraki actually ends up touching the Nomu, and it actually begins to decay a part of its arm. The Nomu obviously regenerates from this, but after seeing this happen, Shigaraki gets enraged, and All Might then busts in through the door with an angry look on his face as he then proceeds to body the Nomu. And Deku, while All Might is bodying the Nomu, would actually focus his attentions on Shigaraki, who he proceeds to decimate and absolutely shit on. Like, Deku bodies this man. It's not funny at all. It's actually quite tragic, but it is what it is. And eventually the heroes end up arriving. Now, when the heroes arrive, Kurogiri decides that, yeah, he got to do something now or he's never going to get the chance to do it at all. So what ends up happening is Deku would actually end up being pushed away by Kurogiri as he teleports him away to another area alongside, say, Todoroki, as everything's frozen, and Deku begins to slide down the mountain with him being like, "Yo!" He uses his webs to catch himself, but at the same time, Shigaraki gets teleported away by Kurogiri, and the villains escape without the Nomu. And so they have a little bit of a 1-week break off of school until eventually all of them are informed of the UA Sports Festival. So yeah, that's pretty much what ends up happening in terms of the USJ, the Heroes versus Villains, and the entrance exams. So what happens next? I'd honestly have to think about it. Do I want Deku to win the entrance exams? Yep, I probably do. All right, the way that the entrance exams go down is something like this. They end up arriving. Izuku is told that he's the one who gives the speech. Izuku walks up to the podium and begins to say that his name is Izuku Midoriya, telling everybody that he's going to be winning this entire thing for his mom that's watching back at home, saying that he owes everything to her and that everybody else better be on their A game, because if not, Deku's running away with that victory. People would be silent for a bit before one of them would actually cheer and be like, "Oh yeah, for his mom. And the rest of the crowd would lose their minds, be like, yeah, whoever your mom is, bro, she rules. And from here, my man Izuku would simply just walk back as they begin to pretty much get ready for the race that Midnight would announce. The starting pistol would be blown, and eventually Todoroki would end up freezing everybody except for Izuku, who's able to jump out of the way and use his webs to actually propel himself out of the area with the ice. He uses his webs once more to actually swing around the 0 pointers, making it extremely easy for him to get around that. And Todoroki would end up freezing an entire 0 pointer. With, Deku and Todoroki pretty much being neck and neck. Deku just pretty much uses his super speed, or no, not super speed, but like enhanced speed to keep up with Todoroki's ice slide. And when the area that arrives where there's like holes in the ground, there's like this huge hole and you have to walk across a rope. What ends up happening is Deku would actually use his spider quirk to simply jump from each pillar to pillar without missing a beat. And then eventually, once he arrives to the landmines, Deku's able to use his spider senses to dodge each and every single one, making it extremely easy for himself to actually get away from that situation. And so, Deku's able to keep up neck and neck with Todoroki until eventually Bakugo comes in and blasts Todoroki off of his ice slide, who was barely behind Izuku, and ends up shooting an explosion at Deku's direction, trying to catch him off guard, but that slows Bakugo down just long enough for Deku to end up passing the finish line and winning, racking up that 10 million point headband that everybody would be wanting at this current moment. When it comes to the cavalry battle, I refuse to cover it. I hate the cavalry battle with a burning passion. So let's just say that the same people from Canon win and make our lives easier. For those of you that wanted to know what happened, too bad. Go ahead and whine about it in the comments, but I could not be bothered to cover the cavalry battle. I hate that part of the UA Sports Festival. It's so bad. Like it's so weird too. Like, why are you having people on your shoulders? I'm sorry for the rant, but it's just atrocious. Like, it's the worst part of the UA Sports Festival, period. So, what should I have happen next? Oh yeah, the fights. Deku versus Shinso. How do I think this would go down? Let me explain. So we all know Deku has his spider senses, right? And Shinso's quirk is all about using his, voice. When Deku hears his voice and has him ask him a question, Deku's spider senses would begin going off like crazy, being like, hey, yo, don't answer him. So Deku stays silent, runs up, hits him with a 1-2, knocks Shinso clean out the ring. Comment bless you down below in the comments if you made it this far. Make sure to go down below and comment, subscribe, tell your friends about the video. And yeah. Seeing as I already interrupted the video by sneezing already, I figured this is the perfect time to tell you guys about the channel memberships. If you're a member of the channel, then you probably were able to see this video about 1 to 2 days before it was even released. So kudos to you if you're a channel member, but if you want to join, you pretty much just get access to early videos for like $10 a month, I think it was. I'm not sure. But yeah, you get cool perks like stickers and like priority reply. Not really that cool, but hey, you get early access to the videos, and so what more do you want? That said, let's get back to the story. Deku beat Shinso, right? Yeah. Okay. So what ends up happening after this is Deku has his battle announced with Todoroki, and Todoroki actually ends up telling Izuku that while his quirk is good as well, he's still going to be losing to him because his quirk and Todoroki's quirk are on 2 different leagues. Deku looks at Todoroki and says that's what he thinks. And so he simply would tell Todoroki not to think that just because he's the son of the number 2 hero, he's going to be getting the chance to walk all over him. Saying that he's not going to be as easy as everybody else who he has had to fight it up until now. With the interaction ending there. Eventually though, Deku would end up finishing everything, and then when he's on his way to the stadium, he ends up bumping into Endeavor. Now, Endeavor would actually end up trying to tell Deku to make Shoto use his other half, but Deku would ask why. Endeavor would tell him that it's none of his business, and after hearing that, Izuku would say that he doesn't have the right to ask him for anything, saying that just because he's the number 2 hero doesn't mean he gets to boss him around. Endeavor would look at him with an angry look, and Deku would then say, no wonder Shoto doesn't like you. Huh, I wouldn't either if I had a dad like you. Some stuck-up number 2 hero. You know, you're nothing like the number 1. All Might will always be better than you. And Endeavor hearing this would be very salty, admittedly. And Deku just walks away whistling as he ends up making his way towards the arena. However, right before the match starts, Deku would say, you know, your old man really is a pain in the ass, right? With Shoto asking what does he mean by that. And he would actually end up informing Shoto that his dad actually went up to him and asked him to actually make him use his fire side. With Todoroki saying, unbelievable, that guy. He can't live it down that I don't want to use his power. But after Deku hears that, he would say, his power? That power is yours, dude. Why don't you want to use your quirk? Shoto and himself would simply be talking, and people in the stands would begin to boo, being like, why are they not fighting? And Deku would be like, oh yeah, it's fighting time. He shoots webs towards Todoroki's direction and begins swinging him towards him, basically letting go of the webs, because if he didn't, he was going to be frozen just like, you know, Sero was. So luckily, he ends up turning off the webs that he ended up shooting at Shoto's direction, and he is actually able to catch Todoroki with a straight punch to the face. Todoroki would freeze one side of the stadium, shooting a giant iceberg that Deku was barely able to dodge out of the way, and Deku would use his web swinging abilities to shoot web all the way at the top of the stadium as he swings all the way up there and says, so looks like this match is going to be a little bit more interesting than I thought. He would then shoot a couple of webs towards Todoroki's direction from afar, but Todoroki would create ice pillars to actually block the attack. Deku, noticing this, would think to himself that he's going to be needing more than that, as he jumps off of the ledge and ends up pretty much using his air time to think about what he's going to do. He shoots a web to another edge of the stadium, and he ends up swinging down all the way towards the direction of Todoroki, who at this point sees Deku coming at him at insane speeds, and before Todoroki knows it, Deku would kick him, sending him flying off of the arena with no second chances, with Todoroki thinking to himself that he was caught off guard because that pillar didn't let him see Deku coming. And so Deku's reigned as the winner, with him thinking, what just happened? Was it really that easy? Todoroki would then begin to say, I don't care about the loss. I just want to know, what do you mean that it's my quirk? It's clearly his. It's my old man's fire quirk. I can't just use it. I'd pretty much be telling him that I'm going to be doing whatever he wants by using him. And Deku would step outside of the arena after being announced the winner for long enough just to tell him that that quirk is his. That might be similar to his father's quirk, but just because his brain pretty much came from his father, that doesn't mean that Todoroki's not going to use it. It's an extension of him. It's his, not his father's, to control. So if he really thinks about it that way, then he's just an idiot. Oh, and by the way, everybody, sorry for the change of levels in the audio. It's just that I decided to turn the gain down a little bit and get closer to the microphone, just because there's a lot of noise in my house as things stand, and I don't want you guys to have to hear too much of that, so I'm just going to be talking louder to make up for that. So yeah. Anyways, though, Deku and Todoroki would have their interaction. Deku ends up telling Todoroki, yo, that's kind of dumb. Don't think that way. Todoroki's like, could it be? And then from here, he decides, you know what? I'm going to start using my fire side. So everything that happens pretty much happens like the original, except Deku's internship. Deku this time doesn't have the opportunity to actually go with anybody. And so, and by anybody, I mean like, what's it called? Gran Torino. I mean, after all, he isn't the successor of One for All, so he doesn't have that opportunity. So instead, what ends up happening is Deku just picks the next best thing, and the best hero that actually ended up sending him an offer. Oh my god, I completely skipped over Deku versus Bakugo in the finals. Okay, yeah, let me get to that. Okay, so we all know Deku and Bakugo have never fought against each other, right? Right. So how do I think this would go? This would actually be a super interesting matchup, like Bakugo versus Spiderman. I think Spider-Man would win, but still, I think it would be an extremely interesting match. Okay, I see it going down something like this. They both are clearly going to be starting off in the center of the arena. Bakugo's going to go in and try close range combat, but after noticing that his attacks don't really land on Deku because of his spider senses, he's able to actually jump up into the air and begin flying around, shooting explosions towards the direction of Deku, but notices that long range attacks don't really work too much in his favor, seeing as he's more of a mid-range combatant. And Deku's able to just shoot webs towards the direction of Bakugo, annoying him quite a bit. And so Bakugo just decides to say, get over it, come on, fight me man to man in the arena. Deku would smile, and Bakugo comes down, trying to trick Deku with a full power explosion to his face, which Deku was able to dodge, and then actually counter by going under and hitting him with a hook right on the side of the ribs, blowing all of the air out of Bakugo, before then doing a backflip that he would use his foot to kick Bakugo into the air, and then propelling himself right into Bakugo's stomach with his knee, sending Bakugo crashing to the arena and pretty much like holding his stomach like, oh, that hurt. And Deku afterwards would be declared the winner. Bing, bada bing, boom. That's the match. Like I said though, Deku would actually end up just accepting the next best internship, and the best one would be Kamui Woods, seeing as that was the highest ranked hero that actually sent him anything. So Deku ends up going with Kamui Woods, and he has a pretty good time. I genuinely don't know what Kamui would actually be able to teach him, and there wouldn't really be no arc for me to cover. Ida ends up dying this time, sadly. Actually, not sadly. That dude is a wet blanket, so good riddance. Stain does end up joining the League of Villains this time around. However, they don't end up getting the extra members like Toga and Spinner, because Stain this time around doesn't end up sending his message of influence. That's another change that happens to the story because of Deku being who he is. That said though, Ida's death would definitely actually end up playing a huge impact on Izuku's life. Not only because Ida now dies this time around, but this actually has genuine repercussions on the series. Normally when I cover Ida's death, I just say that they mourn for about a week and UA continues like usual. But more realistically speaking, we see what happens when a student from UA gets kidnapped, and the media goes crazy after UA, saying that UA is incompetent. So this time I'm actually going to be doing something with the narrative that Ida dies this time around. This has repercussions like Manuel having his hero license suspended for not being able to take care of a hero student. This has UA actually being shut down for a couple of weeks, or 2 months, I guess you could say would be a better time frame, due to their incompetence and inability to keep students safe and manage their mental health. And keep them in line and make them do what they're supposed to. So this definitely has some repercussions on the series. Number one, because it ends up inevitably skipping the entire finals area, and it actually ends up skipping over the entire forest area. So those events never end up happening, leading to no Camino accident, and so All Might still has his time left and he's able to continue being a hero for way longer. However, during this time, the students are unsure of what to do, but they are told by UA that things should be resolved. A couple of students, like 2, would be pulled out from the UA program entirely because they don't want their kids to end up dead on a t-shirt. So yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense. But eventually the entirety of UA would end up returning after 2 months, and the UA dormitory system would be in place a lot sooner than in canon. So take the good with the bad, I guess you could say. That said, they do actually end up to come back to actually taking the finals and actually doing a little bit of review and a whole lot of studying for the content that they missed during those 2 months. But UA High School would get back on its feet, and eventually they end up having the day of the finals come around the corner. This time around, the matches for who everybody's going to be fighting against is actually going to be switching. And by that, I mean that Deku and Bakugo don't really have like a I hate you relationship together, so I don't think the teachers are going to be pairing them up against each other. So instead, I'm going to be actually saying that they're going to be pairing Izuku with Toru, Invisible Girl. I don't know. I just feel like having her as a liability on the team would kind of give like Deku a drawback, and I don't know. I just didn't really feel like thinking about it too hard. So yeah, Toru's gonna be the one who's actually on Izuku's team. So who are they gonna fight against? Aizawa. Aizawa sounds like a pretty solid choice for Deku to fight. All right, so how does this go down? How do I picture this going down? Actually, I have the perfect way. I think this is something that Spider-Man would definitely do, just because he can. Does that make sense? Deku grabs onto Toru and he holds onto her waist as he swings with her through the air, using each building to swing all the way across to the finish line. And when he does end up arriving, Aizawa would actually end up being there, pretty much expecting that Deku would have done something like that. And Aizawa would actually end up using his Quirk cancellation ability, making it so that Deku was unable to actually shoot more webs, but his physical strength doesn't actually end up going away because that's sort of a mutation that happened. So Deku was able to, with his last strand of web, actually swing up to a rooftop with Toru and tell her that that could have ended up badly, saying that so long as Aizawa has his quirk active, they're going to be having a little bit of a hard time facing him. Toru would look at Izuku and say, yeah, probably. What do you think I sneak up on him? And Deku would say, that sounds like a good plan, except for the fact that it's Aizawa sensei. I doubt you'll be able to actually sneak up on somebody like him. He would say she could try it though, and so she would end up pretty much just hiding away in hiding away in plain sight. And Deku would simply wait for Aizawa to make his way towards the rooftop. When Aizawa would actually end up arriving, he would end up fighting against Aizawa, and he would display the sorriest hand-to-hand combat Aizawa has ever seen. Without his spider senses and super strength, he was completely incompetent when it comes to fighting against somebody like Aizawa, who literally eats, breathes, and sleeps fighting against people without quirks, who are so used to relying on their quirks. So once Deku realizes that if he doesn't have his quirk, he's pretty much useless, this definitely ends up impacting Izuku on a personal level. Like, this isn't something that Deku's just going to walk away from being like, oh no, it was just that one time because I lost my quirk. No, Izuku and Toru end up failing because of the fact that Izuku is simply too reliant on his quirk. That's a thing that I could definitely see happening to Izuku. So they would both end up being beaten, and Aizawa would tell Toru that he sees her. Well, not sees her, but he knows she's there. So Toru pretty much ends up giving up, and they fail. So yeah, that's what ends up happening in terms of that. They have to go to after school, seeing as this time they're not going to be having a forced training camp, but they do end up having to, for a couple of weeks, instead of doing school and stuff like that, they end up just pretty much working on special moves, upgrading their costumes, yada yada yada. During this time though, Deku would have actually ended up thinking that his costume does need a little bit of changes. It's not vibrant enough. It doesn't scream out hero enough. So he ends up getting a new version of his costume, and it's more tailored to the original Spider-Man costume, the red and blue silhouette. So his suit is a lot more cooler. It's pretty much the same costume. It's made with a different material this time. And Deku this time around actually has a couple of features added to his costume that make it pretty cool. He creates his own web slingers, fake ones at that. And not only that, but during this time that they have to train, Deku would simply begin training on his physical strength and pure hand-to-hand combat prowess. Seeing as, even though he is talented and good at it, he's not Aizawa talented and good at it. So he asked Aizawa if he could personally teach him a couple of things. And Aizawa would gladly be able to do this, telling Deku to work with him in terms of this. And one person that would actually be working alongside Izuku would be Shinso, who at this point would be trying his best to get into 1A. Deku would actually egg him on, telling him that he actually has a very impressive quirk, telling him that if anybody deserves that spot, it's him. And, him and Shinso would train for a couple of days, getting to know each other on a more personal level. And all in all, they have a pretty decent connection. Nothing insane, but it's okay. They both can stand each other. They can both talk to each other. Some small talk here and there. You guys know what I mean. That said though, we eventually do end up coming up on the provisional hero license part. And this is yet another arc that I despise covering. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to speed run this arc. All right. So, how do you really even cover the provisional hero license arc? It's just, there's really no imminent threat. Nothing really goes down. You know what I mean? Like, everybody kind of just is forced to work as a team and get bombarded by a couple of enemies. This version of Deku doesn't get caught off guard by Toga because she's not in the League of Villains anymore. So he ends up passing. Todoroki ends up passing this time around because he uses his fire side. He keeps away from Inasa and sticks more closer to Izuku, seeing as they're going to become somewhat friends. Bakugo still ends up failing because he's rude to the exam proctors. And yeah, provisional license Sam passed. What's the next arc that happens after that? I genuinely always forget this. Oh yeah, after that they actually end up doing the overhaul arc, but I don't really know how to cover that right now, so I'm going to be covering it tomorrow. I'm back and I am refreshed. I'm ready to do this. So we're gonna start off with a easy introduction to the arc, and we're just gonna ease our way into it. All right. So the way that I see this all going down is obviously Izuku would end up walking into class one day. I'm gonna have him walk into class a little bit earlier to talk to Aizawa about something, and I'm kind of just gonna be keeping it secret for now. You guys are gonna find out what it's for later, but it's going to be a couple of tips that Aizawa is going to be giving Izuku for fighting against certain type of villains and how to stay a certain type of how to keep a little bit of a like sneaky factor to yourself, if that makes sense. That said, he ends up sitting towards the back, and eventually 3 students end up arriving once everybody gets to the classroom. Obviously, Mirio and the big 3, and when this happens, I picture this going exactly like it does in the original. Nothing's going to be changing. Mirio is going to be telling them that they need experience, and that due to what happened with past events, they're going to be needing it more than ever. So he then goes on to challenge the entire class and tell them that this time they're all going to be under more of a heavy patrol and a heavy watch, and they're going to be having more mental tests and have a go through a lie detector test to see if they're fully ready to even go on these internships, because they're slowly going to try to ease into it, but seeing as the way things have gone, it's not going to be the easiest thing in the world. The entire class is like, you want us to fight you, just you? And Mirio just smiles and says, yeah, why not? Everybody just looks at each other and is like, are we really gonna do this? And then Mirio just, he has a smile on his face, but Aizawa tells everybody to come on, that they're going to be going to the UA like facility where they can all train on their super moves. They end up arriving, and Mirio would essentially proceed to ask them if they're ready. As soon as one of them would say yes, Mirio blitzes to them and proceeds to annihilate them like it's bad. Eventually, after defeating everybody with a minor amount of trouble from Todoroki, seeing as he has an ice quirk, and that's what I perceive Todoroki to use. But when he does that and he shoots ice at Mirio, Mirio just permeates through the ice and comes in with an insane uppercut straight to the chin of Todoroki, sending that man crashing away. And when it comes to Bakugo, his explosions definitely are going to be caught off guard by Mirio, because Mirio just has more experience, he has more strength, and this version of Bakugo is pretty much about the same strength as the one in the original. So he's not going to be doing anything to Mumble and Mirio. However, when it comes to Izuku, when he comes in for a punch, Deku's actually able to dodge it and pretty much predict his attack very easily, just like he does in the original, like mid difficulty. Mirio would then go in to use his poking of the eye attack, where he pretty much goes to hit Deku in the stomach and say power, but instead of what happened in the original happening, Deku was actually able to use his spider sense ability and dodge out of the way for Mirio to actually have his arm grabbed by Izuku, and he would flip Mirio straight onto his back, just like he would have done to Bakugo in the original canon. When Mirio gets hit onto the ground, he coughs out a little bit of spit and he's like oh, that definitely left a mark, but he permeates through and begins to pop back up, trying to fight against Deku. He gets closer and he begins to actually fight against him hand to hand, with Deku saying that he's not going to hold back anymore, and he would eventually end up throwing a full power blow at Mirio that he would permeate through, before then coming back up and hitting Deku so fast that Deku just simply wasn't able to react. He sends Deku back flying. Deku gets back up and he's ready to continue, but Aizawa would say that enough is enough, they're done for the day. Mirio and Deku both look at him and say, but the fight was just, and the students would all be getting up groggily, being like, that hurts. But Aizawa would simply tell them all to go get changed back, and that pretty soon they're going to be looking at their listing for internship options. Izuku would actually have a talk with Mirio afterwards, and Mirio would actually end up telling Izuku that if he wants, he could actually end up going to his agency. Izuku would ask what agency exactly that is, and Mirio would inform him that he actually worked really closely with Sir Nidai, All Might's past sidekick. Deku would say, wait, Sir Nidai? The Sir Nidai? And he would get pretty excited, obviously going on to accept this offer, and eventually they would arrive. This time around, it's not going to be going at all anything like the original, because of the fact that Deku does not have one for all. Mirio does. All Might and Nidai are actually on semi-good terms, you know what I mean? Like, it's still a little awkward for All Might, but Night Eye never really held a grudge, so they're pretty much fine. And Sir Night Eye still ends up doing the little like precognition thing where he tries to make Deku take the stamp. However, this time he knew he was going to be able to do it, so he just kind of did it as a formality. But nonetheless, he still ended up doing his thing, and Deku does end up getting the stamp really easily just because of the nature of his quirk, speed, and strength, as well as his spider senses that allowed him to get the upper hand on Sir Night Eye, and honestly just allow him to get the stamp. Overall, it's a pretty clean process, and what I believe ends up happening following this altercation is essentially this. Eventually Sir Night Eye ends up telling Mirio and Izuku to go on a hero patrol just to watch him very, very closely, and so they do so. Mirio begins to tell Izuku a bunch of things, and Izuku admittedly asks a bunch of questions to Mirio, like what's the hardest thing about being a hero, like what is Sir Night Eye is like gonna put me through, like what can I expect? And Mirio, he answers these questions honestly, you know what I mean? Like, why is he gonna lie? Eventually, when they're walking though, some small little girl, obviously Eri, runs into Deku and she's scared, yada yada yada. Deku looks at her and he looks into the alleyway, only to see Overhaul there. His spider senses immediately go off, sensing danger in the way. And Mirio would immediately be quick to notice that this is Shisaki. And what would end up actually happening from here is Mirio looks at Deku and gives him this look of let him go. But Deku ain't having it. I'm sorry, but Deku is not going to be having it whatsoever. Deku looks at, Overhaul and he's like, oh, sure, like you can have her back. He gives Eri one last quick hug. And as soon as Overhaul is out of his way, Izuku jumps onto the wall and begins wall crawling, with Mirio looking at him, asking what he thinks he's doing. And Izuku would look at him saying, I'm not going to let her go. This is what being a hero is all about. And so he climbs up to the top of the roof and uses his webs to pretty much go from rooftop to rooftop, following Shisaki in the alleyway. Eventually, however, Shisaki would pretty much put his glove back on and he would be walking with Eri, as he smacks her across the head and tells her that she'll never run away again and that he'll be sure of that, giving her a death stare. Deku, seeing that, would get enraged, unlike any other time that he's ever been angry, and Deku is not going to be pulling his punches. Deku is going to jump down there and shoot a spider web straight at Overhaul's direction. He goes in for a punch and sends Overhaul crashing onto the ground. Overhaul would get up groggily after ripping the webs off of his face by using his Overhaul quirk, and he would then slam his hands at the ground saying, "Now you die!" Eventually, spikes would come up from the earth, and Deku begins using his spider sense to dodge and his speed and wits to actually get out of the way of all of these spikes. Looking towards the direction of Eri, who he doesn't want to get hurt, he shoots a web at her and sends her flying towards the direction of Mirio, who is coming in to help out Izuku. Mirio then comes in for the attack, and using about 30% of One for All full cowling, is able to actually almost land a blow on Overhaul, if it wasn't for the fact that he ended up pretty much using his ability to get out of the way of Mirio and make it so that Mirio ended up hitting like a mud wall of earth on the ground. And so after this happens, Izuku looks to Overhaul and says, that's it, it's his hands. That's the way that we're going to be defeating this guy. He ends up looking towards Mirio and says, Mirio, do your thing. Mirio nods and Izuku tells him, get out of the way. And it gives him just enough time for Izuku to actually web up Overhaul and web him up completely, to the point where his hands are pretty much useless. He can't use his hands and he can't reach for his quirk destroying bullets. So essentially what ends up happening here is Mirio, sorry, a car alarm went off. I gotta pause the video. The alarm turned off. Let's get back into it. Essentially allowing Izuku to pretty much wrap his arms of, rendering Overhaul useless. And following this event, Mirio went in for a punch and knocked Overhaul clean out on the ground. And from here, Overhaul was simply just laying down, like this man was sleeping on the floor. But when Deku walks up to Overhaul, he looks at Eri and anger just fills him. So he kicks Overhaul as hard as he can, breaking his right arm and sending him crashing into the wall. As he then turns to Mirio, who asks him what he thinks he's doing, and Deku would say that he's protecting that little girl. Did you not see what I had to see? He literally hurt this girl for trying to get away from him. That's something that only a monster could do. Mirio would kind of understand these feelings and tell him that he can't let his personal feelings get in the way. Izuku would say that he's glad whatever's coming to Overhaul is coming his way, and he would say that he wishes the worst possible sentence for him, hopefully death. But Miria would look at him and simply say, yeah, that's fine. Grab the girl. I'm going to take his body. Izuku holds on to Eri and tells her that from now on, she'll never have to be afraid again. And Eri, she smiles and begins to cry into Izuku's chest, telling him thank you repeatedly, over and over, telling him that he, saved her and how thankful she is to him. Eventually, however, they would all end up pretty much getting to a situation where nothing's really going on. You know what I mean? Eri is pretty much with Aizawa, seeing as her quirk is something that needs to be under control, and the school system comes back. And yeah, that's pretty much what's going down for now. Eventually, what I think would end up going down is they go back to school, they have the school festival, and the school festival fight with Deku and Sir Gentle or whatever is actually something interesting because of the area that they fought in the original. Like, they fought in this area that Deku could take full control of because of his powers. So I'm going to cover it just because why not? Obviously, Deku forgets his things, and the situation pretty much unravels almost exactly like the one in canon, except when Deku realizes that this guy's there to do something to the sports festival and ruin something for Eri. My man's not having it. He shoots webs at Gentle and then pretty much sends him flying back with a punch. Gentle frees himself, and then using his elasticity, air quirk or whatever it is that Gentle uses, he begins to pretty much run away and go towards the area with the construction site. When Deku arrives there, he begins swinging his webs all over the place and actually shoots full webs. They end up making it to this encased area, right? And what Izuku would do is shoot full on webs that trap Gentle and himself in that area. La Brava actually ends up using her quirk to power up Gentle Criminal, just enough for him to rush in and throw a couple of punches at Deku's direction. But Deku, he's not having it, man. This man is not about to ruin Eri's fun day. So Deku punches Tsunade and absolutely pummels this man, with his final punch not even being held back, and he devastatingly hurts Gentle. He then turns to La Brava and he chases her down and actually ends up making it so that both of them this time around end up being taken to jail. That's pretty much the only big change that happens. So yeah, following these events, I'm not really sure what the timeline looks like after this, so I'm going to pause the video and go check that out. Okay, I figured it out. So what naturally comes after the point where I was just covering would normally be the the pro hero arc, where Endeavor ends up fighting the Kayanomu, and that ends up happening just like usual. We then cut to the joint training arc, and that's actually going to be happening. However, what happens afterwards is something that's actually going to be changing in the series. So we're going to be having the joint training arc, but then after that we're going to be having the forest training arc, which happened in the original. So covering the joint training arc is not going to be one of the biggest things in the world, seeing as the teams pretty much remain constant. Deku's team is still going to be filled with Uraraka, Mina, and also, Mineta's not there. So we're going to replace it with Shinso. And he ends up fighting against Monoma, that one girl with the red outfit, that one kid who has super smart. And honestly, I don't know these 1 Class B members, but you guys know who I'm talking about. With the exclusion of Shinso being on their team, he's instead on Izuku's team. So that's going to be pretty good for them. And the way that I see this going down is essentially Izuku and Shinso sticking close together, with Uraraka using her gravity quirk to actually help Shinso out so that he's weightless and he's actually able to pretty much do the same thing that Deku is. Using his scarf, he's able to shoot it up to places and actually swing around just like Deku would, to get to top places, run around, and swing once again. They end up making it halfway, and once they get there, it's more of a darkish area. And Izuku and Shinso both immediately decide that they're going to be taking care of them right now, using the perfect opportunity that they have. They end up using the training that they learned from Shinso for all this time, or no, not from Shinso, but from Aizawa, to, outclass them, because they are more specifically tailored to fighting people who are unaware of their presence, because it's just one of the things that Aizawa has taught them on. Aizawa explains to Izuku that he comes up front way too much and that he needs more of these tactics, and seeing as Shinso's there, he ends up learning these things by byproduct. We end up having it so that Ochako and Mina are all in plain sight, and eventually what ends up going down is that Monoma would actually be set right in the, actually no, I don't want that to happen. Instead, I want that one girl with the red hair and the chubby fat kid to pull up out of nowhere, right? And Mina and Uraraka will be standing there. They're both gonna be like, look, they're here, right? This is part of their plan. And they would look at them and like what ends up happening is Uraraka mouths the words, but it comes out of Shinso's thing and she ends up asking a question. This ends up leading to both of them essentially being taken out of the question. And after that happens, Monoma and the tall kid would end up arriving, or girl or whatever it is, and pretty much end up being like, ha 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 ha. You know, he starts smiling, saying that he's going to be defeating them. And he then rushes in and using one of the quirks from his classmates, like, say Ibarra, her, like, no, he can't use her quirk. Whose quirk could he realistically? Oh yeah, Tetsu. Using his quirk, he actually ends up rushing in straight for Mina, and her using her acid would not do jack nothing to this man. He bops her straight in the head and she gets taken out immediately. Araka, on the other hand, she's almost taken out, but that's when Shinso comes in and kicks the other dude away, sending him flying, or her, I'm not really sure what it is. But basically, then Izuku is able to actually drop down, and Monoma gets just in reach to actually touch Izuku. From here, Monoma could definitely feel the power coursing through himself. He shoots a spider web at Izuku and says, "This is interesting. I've never had a quirk like this before. This is going to be fun." Izuku takes his mask off and says, "He copied my quirk?" And he thinks to himself, I didn't think you'd be able to copy someone like mine. But eventually Monoma rushes in at Izuku and both of them end up fighting, with Deku not having to hold back. Monoma throws full power blow at Izuku and it sends him flying into the area, while Shinso and Araka are the ones responsible for handling the other person. Izuku and Monoma would end up scrapping. Now, both of them are throwing the fists, but ultimately Deku is the original user. Like, obviously Monoma is pretty strong with a quirk, but he's never had to use a quirk something like this. Obviously super strength isn't something new, but Izuku is just superior to him in hand-to-hand combat, so the battle is kind of what you would expect from something like Spider-Man versus like evil Spider-Man who has less experience, kind of, I guess you could say. So Deku eventually obviously ends up winning because my man is the original Spooter Deku. But yeah, he ends up winning, and bing bang boom, that's it for that arc. Next arc, like I said, is the forest training arc. And honestly, I could genuinely go into detail with everything that happens leading up to this event, but pretty much picture it just like it was in the original. I don't think anything should genuinely be changed. You know, they get in the bus, they end up being thrown off the cliff, they end up having to rush in. The first couple of days, they're all just training on their quirks. Deku's doing hand-to-hand combat. Aizawa asks him why he doesn't go all out with his punches. Deku shows him by showing him just how strong he is truly with his quirk. And Aizawa is shocked to see just how powerful Deku is. I mean, he is genuinely in a league of his own when it comes to strength. It's not funny how powerful Izuku is, so he definitely has to hold back a ton when it comes to fighting villains. So Aizawa ultimately ends up understanding the situation, and eventually the night where the villains would end up arriving would end up happening. Muscular, not Toga, because keep in mind they don't end up joining, so Toga and Spinner aren't part of the equation, but everybody else who was present on that day are going to be there. And we add Stain into the picture, and we're also going to be adding some other random background villain with like some pretty powerful like I'm gonna say that we're actually gonna throw Wolfram in there. And in case you guys don't know who that is, that's actually the villain from the first My Hero Academia movie, the guy who was able to control metal. Yeah, we're gonna be using him for this situation. He's not going to be too useful because keep in mind, there's not a lot of metal around in this area, but we'll see what I can think up of when the moment arrives. So what ends up happening here is essentially pretty much Deku follows Koda, because those small little interactions with Deku saving Koda still happens, and Koda just genuinely is having a pretty bad day. So he follows him up to the mountain, and Deku tries to talk to Koda. He's like, dude, like, why are you not with everybody else? Koda just looks at Deku angrily, telling him to get out of there, that he isn't wanted, and that, you know, just leave the food there, go. But Deku puts it down and turns the corner, only to see Koda crying by himself. He doesn't even touch the food, he just looks sad. But eventually, Muscular comes in out of nowhere, and Izuku's like, villains? But from here, he shoots his web at Koda's direction and grabs him and pretty much pulls him near, telling Koda to go now. As Koda just looks up to Muscular, looks at Deku, and he says, but what about? Izuku looks at him and says, don't worry about me, get out now! And Koda just runs off searching for Aizawa. It's at this moment that Deku stands back and looks at the giant behemoth that is Muscular, as he says, I was really hoping I'd get to kill that kid, but I guess I'm just gonna have to settle for you and kill him later. Deku would look at him and say that you're not gonna be killing anybody, that he hates people like him. And Muscular smiles as he says, bring it on then, kid. He clashes both fists together as he runs in for a full-powered punch at Izuku, and Deku jumps up into the air and throws a full punch as strong as he possibly can at Muscular. Now, what ends up happening is both of the punches are like collide for a second and it seems even, but then Muscular puts a little bit more muscle fiber into it and Deku is sent flying back with all of the force. Deku gets sent flying back and it definitely hurts him. His forearm is feeling the impact of the blow, but Deku decides to end up actually trying to see if maybe this can work. He shoots spider webs at Muscular's direction, and he actually ends up seeing some rocks nearby that he would shoot his webs at and throw at the direction of Muscular to catch him off guard. Izuku runs up to Muscular and punches him straight in the face one time. Muscular tries to grab him off of him, but Deku just pretty much ends up crawling over his body and ends up tying Muscular up in a huge amount of webs, similar to what the Amazing Spider-Man did to, what's his name, Kirk Connors and the Lizard, right? The Lizard. And Izuku's pretty much doing that to Muscular. Obviously, he ends up ripping out of it, but after this happens, Deku jumps in and he ends up pummeling Muscular over and over and over, sending full power blows straight to Muscular's face, and he's sitting there by pretty much tightening his legs onto Muscular's neck, choking him with his nuts in his face as Deku is straight pummeling this man. I like the fact that I just ignored that I said that and just continue the story, but he's pummeling this man Muscular in the face. And it's just an onslaught. Muscular eventually just ends up passing out onto the floor, and Izuku would look at him and say that, you know, this clearly wasn't an even battle. Before then running to look for Aizawa, who at this point just finished taking out the Dabi clone. Izuku runs into the forest, and he would actually end up running into Dupli Arms and Tokiyami. Not having the ability to actually help them in this situation, he simply tells Shoji to grab on, and he swings through the forest area to get as far as he possibly could from Tokiyami, until they eventually end up arriving near Bakugo Todoroki. That goes pretty much like canon, and from here, Deku doesn't have any big fights. Stain is actually going to be fighting against Aizawa. Now, that's a fight that I would pay top dollar to watch. I genuinely would, but I am just unsure of who would even win this battle. Make sure you guys comment it down below. Who do you guys think would win in a one-on-one battle using all their experience and knowledge, Aizawa or Stain? Who do you guys genuinely believe would win that battle? Now, for plot's sake, I'm just going to be making it so that Aizawa actually wins, just because if he doesn't, he's going to die, and, you know, we don't want that happening. So I'm going to be saying that Aizawa wins because he gets outside external help from the Wild Wild Pussycats. And when it comes to the enemy known as Wolfram, we're actually going to be having him get into a little bit of an altercation with who's somebody who I think potentially could fight him. Yeah, there's not a lot of people who could probably fight him. I'm just gonna be saying that he gets into a fight with the other pro hero, like Vladimir, like Blood Vlad, or I don't know. You guys know who I'm talking about, right? Like the teacher of Class 1B. So that's going down, and what ends up happening from here is essentially everything goes like in canon. Bakugo gets kidnapped, Tokiyami gets kidnapped, Mr. Compress ends up arriving out of nowhere, and this kind of is where the story ends. In the original story, Izuku is pretty like good buddies, and he doesn't want to watch anything bad happen to Kachan. But with the other students end up pretty much being like, oh, like we really want to help Bakugo, Izuku is just like, I don't know if I want to go. And what ends up happening here is that they just don't know what to do. Momo doesn't actually end up making their tracker and says that it should be better left to the heroes, saying that in their position, if they were to get caught, they would probably get expelled and cause more problem for UA than it's worth. Saying that Bakugo's definitely going to be coming back, but seeing as things are standing with the death of Ida and Bakugo being kidnapped, UA will probably be closed permanently unless the heroes are able to retrieve him. So we're in no position to like do anything. And that's just genuinely the position that the heroes are in right now. Eventually, the heroes are able to come through, and that goes like it does in canon. The All Might fight against All For One goes like it does in canon. There's no need for me to explain that. And so, with that said, Overhaul is taken care of, and All For One is taken care of. The two main big and bad antagonists of the series. So, where does that leave us here? Like, I just don't know what to cover next. Like, I mean, All For One is in prison. Actually, I'm going to be making one major change to the story. I always hated the fact that All Might just let this man All For One live. Instead of just hitting him and All For One living, I'm gonna say that All Might is able to charge up one last Detroit smash and straight pummels this man All For One in front of like millions of people watching in Japan. All Might definitely does get a little bit of backlash for this, but seeing as he's the symbol of peace, nothing happens to him. So All For One dies. Shigaraki's master plan of him becoming whoever it is that he becomes in like later doesn't happen. But Shigaraki does end up having the awakening of his quirk. But Shigaraki isn't really something that I'm really too pressed about. I don't think Shigaraki will generally become a threat. If you guys really want me to cover that arc, then make sure to comment down below, and I'll consider doing a potential extra part to this series where Deku and the rest of the heroes end up encountering Shigaraki somewhere and they have this crazy final battle. But if not, that concludes What If Deku was Spider-Man. Let me know what you guys thought of the video so far, and if you made it to the end of the video, make sure you guys go down below and comment #birthdayboy, because today is my birthday, so I would appreciate a like genuinely would appreciate a like on today's video. Come on, you can do that. Give me a little birthday gift. Give your boy a like. But yeah, if you made it this far, give yourself a pat on the back. It's been your boy Zether. I'm gonna go celebrate now. Peace out. Bye.